Hey guys, so one of the first questions that people ask me about automotive wiring is what tools do you need, how much does everything cost, and where do you buy it? I thought I'd put a video together today showing some of the basic tools that I use day in and day out, along with maybe some of the more expensive ones that are helpful but might not be the first thing you'd want to buy just due to how much they cost. I'm also going to show you a couple that I will never use and a few of the supplies and whatnot that get used on a project. So starting off, two of the tools that you will never see me use are these wire strippers and these crimpers. These are both very cheap, probably $20 a piece. They work, they strip wire, they crimp connectors, but honestly they're junk. Unless you just have no other choice, please don't get these. So now that that's out of the way, the ones that I will use day in and day out, start with some side cutters, diagonal cutters. They go by different names. You can get cheap ones. I think these are Champion from a small kit. This is more from Klein. These are going to run $30 or $40. Klein you can get at Home Depot. Of course, Amazon. You can get these sort of things pretty much anywhere. They're invaluable. Cutting zip ties, cutting wire. You can't have too many of them laying around. Also, Klein. You'll see a lot of Klein Tools from me. Here's a 3 different set of catapult cutters that I use. Now they are for stripping wire. You can see I got an old pair, a slightly less old pair, and a brand new pair. So let's just look at these for now. If you're wanting to strip wire, there's really not much better that you can do with this. I mean, it makes it quick and easy. You just line up the right gauge wire. I will say that sometimes I don't think these numbers are exactly accurate. For instance, this should be a 20 gauge wire, I believe. I would probably end up stripping it over here on the 18. When I do it on the 20, it just, you see, I cut a couple strands of copper right there. But long story short, you get a feel for what you can strip with them and what you shouldn't. And once you get that feel, they are invaluable. It'll take a 5-minute job if you're doing it with a pocket knife and turn it into 3 seconds. So moving on from that, I would say these Iwiss crimpers, IWISS, are the best bang for your buck you're going to find. These, I believe I got off Amazon. You can order them from a lot of different places. But I use these on a lot of the small Delphi terminals. A lot of the GM stuff that I do, either a weather pack connector or some of the MetroPack stuff, I can use these. And I might come back in a second and show you some of those crimps. But these aren't expensive at all. Like I said, I think they're about $20. They work great. Probably the best inexpensive tool I've bought. Next, I would say these Klein crimper cutters are pretty important to me. I use a lot of barrel terminals, and this type of jaw is what works best on them. Like I said, I can come back and probably show a demonstration of crimping with them. They are in the $40 range, I believe, as well. They are great for cutting bigger wire. You can cut zip ties. You can cut a lot of different things with them. But that barrel crimp right there is what's important about them, as opposed to some of the MetroPack type crimps that you'd see with this cutter right here. So those are probably some of the basic tools that I'm always having in my hands. Cutting, stripping, crimping. I mean, that's kind of the order it goes in. Some of these nicer crimpers I'll talk about. If you're doing a lot of MetroPack work, WeatherPack work, once again, GM-based stuff, you get into some of these ratcheting crimpers. And if you notice, it's basically the same jaw as the cheaper Iwiss. The difference is some of these get a little bigger. So if I'm crimping a 12 gauge wire or 10 gauge wire, I'm usually using these. And I don't remember exactly what brand they are. They're in the, they're not cheap though. They're about $120 set of crimpers designed for MetroPack. The label there's worn off. I ordered them, but I do not remember where from. But these are getting into be some quality crimpers. You can see they're made in USA. And if you're doing multiple projects or maybe you're rewiring a vehicle front to back, it's $120, but it makes work a lot better. Along the same line of thoughts, these are some more Iwiss crimpers, but they're a little bit more on the larger side. You might crimp 8 gauge, 6 gauge with them. You can see it written on there. So maybe a large barrel connector, something like that. They just kind of switch out their jaw right here. Different colors. I'm generally doing number 8, number 6 with them. Maybe a large copper terminal, something like that. I can get that out in a second. We can talk about it. And then up from that, the biggest crimpers that I deal with, I think of these as almost battery cable crimpers. If you're running some number 2 battery cable or something of that nature, number 6, number 8, you got some of the large copper terminals, we can crimp with these. Now, again, these aren't cheap. They're about $150 if I remember right. And I believe I got them off Amazon as well. I'll have to go back and look at the information. Maybe I can leave it in a comment there. But this is something you're only going to do if you're completely rewiring a vehicle, making battery terminals, maybe making large alternator terminals, winches, things like that. But they are definitely invaluable if you're doing the larger gauge wire. Obviously, you can't strip the wire with these Kleins, but it would be more of a job for, you know, a razor blade or a pocket knife. But once you got to it, these would be the crimpers. So some of the other tools I use maybe aren't crimpers or cutters or anything like that, but they are pretty invaluable around the shop. And you might laugh at first, but one of the most impressive things I can use is a flexible tape measure. A lot of people use these when they're sewing or doing crafts, things like that. If you have your regular, you know, carpenter's tape measure that's metal and it wants to stay rigid, it just doesn't lend itself very well to, you know, measuring around a car or around a inner fender, up under a hood or something. But with a flexible tape measure, you can really, you know, approximate a bend. So if I'm cutting a wire, I'll pull this out and go around it like that. Once again, a metal tape measure just isn't going to do what you need. You're going to fight it, and you're going to be more aggravated than anything. But I would definitely get a craft or a sewing style tape measure, and it just makes life a lot easier, I found. Also, these are medical scissors, I guess, for lack of a better word. Maybe there's a better term for them. I'm not in the medical world, but I have a bunch of these. I have friends that are paramedics, things like that, and I'll get new ones, hopefully no bloody gory ones. But they can cut wire. They get dull, but in a pinch, I've sometimes cut wire with them. What they do really, really well is cut loom. I don't want to just totally make a mess, but you can see it cuts right through this stuff. And I use pretty much all woven fiber loom when I'm building a harness or doing any kind of chassis wiring. So these cutters definitely come in handy. If I were to use a regular pair of scissors, it does work, but it's just not quite the same. They cut it, but you got to make a lot more passes with it. So these medical shear scissors, someone can tell me the right name for them. They really get the job done. Of course, you can cut through, you know, a lot of other things with a lot of other fabrics and maybe some old original wiring. You can hack through it pretty quick with these. Also, you'll find real quick, especially if you're trying to work with some existing wiring, a set of picks is almost invaluable. This is actually from Mac. I've had this for years. I have no clue what they cost nowadays. I'm sure you can find them on every tool truck, along with, you know, Tractor Supply, Harbor Freight, things like that. This one as well. Again, I don't remember where I got it from, but these shapes, find you something similar, something you can release tabs with, release terminals with. It's just, there's not enough of these that you can have. Picks are always very important. And here's a big mess of depinning tools. I don't want to get too deep into the idea of depinning because that could be a whole video in and of itself. But you can go on Amazon and spend $20 and get these assortments of depinning tools. I mean, there's everything here. They're a little flimsy. Sometimes you can bend them. But for the price, you can't beat it. These everything from stereo systems to Delphi connectors and everything in between. There's a little bit of everything here. I think literally $19. Got all those, you know, in my hand. I have a few others. These are just some random things that I keep in the toolbox. This is a basic, I think they call it a Delphi tool. It's got some picks and a bent weather pack tool there. This is another version of it. You can see various picks. Don't be afraid to grind down a screwdriver. There's always something that works for depinning. So that's some of the basics I use. Just for the heck of it, I'll show you some of the more expensive crimp tools I use. So these are Rennsteig, made in Germany. I'm probably not saying the word right, but these are a couple of the more expensive crimpers I use for the GM terminals. I'll show you an example. For instance, the MetroPack 280s. They use something like this, the MetroPacks, and you basically cannot get a better crimp than these. Any better, and you'd have to have a robot. These are about $350 a piece. The crimper is one price. The die is another. You buy them separately. They're nothing that I would expect anyone to buy off of the first day they get a project, but if you're doing a lot of GM work, specifically LS work, these are worth their weight in gold, which they're pretty heavy. It might be expensive, but I use these all the time building LS harnesses, LT harnesses, things like that. So again, that shows you the high end of what a normal person would buy and have in their toolbox. These are definitely dealer grade quality tools, if not better than that. GM does a lot of their actual wiring harnesses with robots and pneumatic crimpers and automated crimpers, things like that. Obviously, not many of us are going to buy that for our home shop, but this would be about the most extravagant I'd expect anyone to see laid on their toolbox, their table.